Welcome along to episode 18 of the Lifting in Life podcast. I'm Cam, I'm the host. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology, I'm a personal trainer, and I also work in IT. Today I have the privilege of chatting to Fred Falloon. He was recommended by a mutual friend. He's a super interesting and articulate guy. He has done a lot of stuff, including right now he's studying a master's in philosophy, politics, and economics. He's also been training at the gym for over 10 years. He's a personal trainer and he's going to compete in his first classic physique show this year. So as you can imagine, there's a bunch of stuff that we delve into and explore in our chat. A few of the key things that we discuss, starting off, we discuss the negative aspects of becoming addicted to training in the gym, which I found really interesting because obviously I am constantly talking about the positive benefits, so having the opposite angle to that I found really interesting. We also talk about the crossover between the learnings and the training, the physical stuff, and the academic pursuits and how they mutually benefit each other. And then also we give some really tangible advice for beginners who are wanting to start on their fitness journey. It's probably even good advice even if you're not a beginner, but just some tangible steps around goal setting and setting yourself up for success. As always, I hope you enjoy the episode. If you want to show support, feel free to like and comment and follow or whatever, on the platform that you're on. But yeah, I hope you enjoy.
Are they still expensive?
Like I haven't bought SD card.
Yeah, I haven't bought an SD. Yeah,
easily pay over $100 for SD card.
Yeah.
Stupid. Anyway, we are live here with Fred. I appreciate you coming on today. You came as a recommendation from a mutual friend. I'd never met you before, but our mutual friend Jonty had some good things to say about you. So it's very exciting to have you here. We got a lot of mutual interests from bodybuilding to the academic stuff, philosophy, psychology, personal training. I feel like it was sort of just meant to be that you're here. I want to start off real basic because obviously I don't know too much about what you do. So I just want to get an understanding of what your current day-to-day sort of looks like. What do you do with your day-to-day at the moment?
Sweet. Well, thanks for having me.
No worries.
Yeah, it's good to hear Jonty's not talking gossip behind my back and he's saying good things.
There's a bit of gossip as well.
There's a bit of gossip.
Yeah,
but yeah. So a little bit about me. So right now I'm currently doing my master's in philosophy, politics, and economics. I came back into academics when COVID hit. So I was actually over in the United States at the time with a girlfriend at the time when the COVID fiasco started. And it was pretty intense being over there. While I was over there, I realized I wanted to come back into study. Prior to that, I had been a personal trainer, strength and conditioning coach. I like to call myself, but just because I don't like that tag, personal trainer. But yeah, I decided to come back into academics, and now currently this year, that's my main focus. Is that if coming to the training side, I like helping people I know. So there's a couple people, like another one of my flatmates I help out just with training and nutrition and stuff like that, and I am pretty open with talking to people in the gym, all that sort of stuff. So if you see me in the gym, feel free to come up and talk to me if you have an issue with something. I like to give my 2 cents. It may not always be the correct 2 cents, but it'll give you a launching pad. Relatively outspoken guy. I am planning on competing in my first ever classic physique show at the end of the year, which is going to be exciting. A coach and everything lined up. I have tried to do a show. I tried to do a show, I think it was 2 years ago. But that same year, earlier that year, I got diagnosed with pan-ulcerative, which is a chronic illness that just isn't the best for stress tolerance. And obviously going into a show the last 4 or 5 weeks is extremely stressful, being in that low calories, and then I was studying at the same time and didn't work out, so I had to pull out of that. My day-to-day sort of structure is I'm an early riser. I like to get up early. I like to get up at 6, no matter what. And then I like to have like an hour of just not doing a lot. I like to get out, sit outside, have my cup of coffee, eat my breakfast. I prep all my meals for the day in the morning. I don't like doing it all on Sunday, like all that. I'd rather have my little ritual in the morning where I can just have that time to decompress, wake up a little, listen to something, set my mind right for the day, and then go from there.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of mutual things that we can definitely agree upon there as well. I'd like to pull it back maybe to your decision to, I suppose, leave the States and come back and study. What was, and then also the topics you chose to study. Do you think the philosophy, politics, economics was that something that you always wanted to study, or do you think given the philosophical, political and economic climate at that time, it sort of prompted your desire to want to explore those topics?
Well, in order to answer that, I might go back even further, and make a bit of a comment about how fitness. Most people our age get into fitness through social media, so that's a big driving force. I probably didn't. I got into it because sports, rugby, all that. But
it's real quick, how old were you when you got into the fitness
I've been
space?
lifting. This is my 10th year of lifting. So I started when just before I turned 14. Before that, I was a really fat kid. No, actually, I can't even say that because now we were talking about this with my mates the other day.
Yeah.
It's like I consider myself a fat kid back then. I was considered a fat kid, but if you go back and look at photos, I'm not fat compared to the kids are these days. So I can't really say that anymore. But I always saw
considered
myself
yourself.
I consider myself a fat kid. And when you start getting into fitness, obviously a great resource is YouTube, is social media and stuff like that. And what tends to happen when you're on these sort of platforms is you get sucked into these other sort of algorithms of politics, philosophy, because that all comes with it. I think that when people talk about fitness and talk about lifting particularly, and its effect on carry over to other aspects of your life, I think that mainly comes from something that can be articulated in a political sense and also a philosophical sense. So one thing that is quite often talked about in these weird sort of online circles is how lifting weights can lead people down a right-wing rabbit hole on YouTube and stuff like that, or it's anti-leftist at least. And you can see that with it being kind of anti-fat acceptance and all that sort of stuff. And you see all these clips going around. You have people like Joey Swole and all those sort of guys people who pop up every now and then talking about this. But where that kind of comes from is that sort of, again, going into other influences like Jordan Peterson, is that sort of personal responsibility. Self-improvement sort of mindset, which I do have some bad things to talk about when it comes to that, or some critiques of the whole self-improvement sort of movement. But it does carry over. So going from lifting weights has been a sort of tool for me, especially to make my life slightly better. Moving from that is okay, there's a practice that I can do to improve my life. It's lifting weights. What other practices can I do to improve my life? Maybe that's reading. Maybe that's becoming more articulate. Maybe that's building confidence in other aspects. So yeah, I think lifting does have a very good carryover in that sort of sense as a first step in the door.
And I love all those observations you can pull from, because superficially it just looks like you're lifting weights, right? You're doing a bicep curl, it's going down and it's coming back up again. I always joke about going to pick stuff up and put it back down again, because that's effectively all you're doing. But doing it from such a young age too, because I was 13, 14 when I got into it, a lot of other things as well as that stuff, it teaches you about sacrificing a part of your day to make yourself better, whatever that means. Could, like, obviously physically looking better is a small part of it, but it's about mentally feeling better. You have made progress from last week, seeing yourself make progress in this facet of your life. Wow, how can I, like you say, make progress in other areas of my life? So being able to pull those observations is really interesting. And I never really thought about how lifting weights could be politicized too. Sometimes I feel, I don't know if it's an American culture thing, but our perspective often can be really binary, right? Especially, you're either doing this or you're not. You either support it or you don't. You can't be on the fence. And I could see how doing something like lifting weights and wanting to improve yourself could become politicized in some areas of that realm, because people are very quick to want to politicize things. So how would you avoid going too deep down that rabbit hole where it becomes more of where you're questioning whether or not it's a positive thing that you're doing? Did you get to a point?
Well, yeah, this is something that I quite like to talk about with people, because when you say you're sacrificing part of your day to work to better yourself, there is definitely something egotistical in there, because you're obviously saying, well, I need to improve myself rather than supporting someone else. There's a greater benefit from my own reason that if I'm a better person, I can be better. I can help more people. If it's like that, then maybe you don't take that step, but a lot of people do. When you're self-reflecting on the political sort of aspect of lifting weights, the danger can become is when you start getting addicted to it. When you start again rely on your personality on it.
Too much of your identity becomes
Too much of
that
your
thing.
identity comes into that, and that's when you become susceptible to beginning locked into these sort of stereotypes.
Like your blinkers are on, right?
Yeah.
That's all you see, and you can't necessarily take a step back to see how you could be doing something else, or maybe there isn't. It's not all sunshine and daisies, this area.
Yeah. I want to talk about addiction, but just touching on the political aspect, there's definitely a political incentive for these left or right factions to select a wide population, something that a lot of people do, especially fitness, since in the last 10 years it's kind of had like this rebirth where everyone kind of like wants to go to the gym, everyone's lifting weights, it's awesome, great, and you can see that just by like there's a huge population to it, not just on social media, but you can also see that in records being broken and stuff for powerlifting and that. It's like football players, the genetic elites are now coming over to powerlifting, and they're just
Smashing it.
cleaning up, because it used to be this weird sort of grungy sport that meatheads used to do. The kid who used to hit his head against the locker and like chew on nails, like that's the guy who used to be powerlifting. It's an interesting culture going back to like the 80s and 90s powerlifter like Dave Tay and the Westside Barbell Crew, and I would recommend everyone looking into that. But lifting can become a negative aspect when it starts to take away from your life. And this, for me, comes between the difference between addiction, being addicted to the gym, and actually loving the gym. Now, love is kind of trivialized, and I will speak on like a better definition of love from my aspect at least. But a good place to start is that love is the opposite of addiction. I got this idea from a guy named John Viveki. If you want to look him up, all those people out there. He's a neuroscientist. I'm not sure. He's got some awesome
scientist of some sort.
He's got some awesome content. He's really well spoken, really good at articulating his points, and very well read. But he talks about this idea of love being the opposite of addiction. Because when you talk about sacrificing time and sacrificing other aspects of your life for this pursuit of lifting, that can become really negative when you start prioritizing that over things that are going to cause a greater negative effect in the long run. And this happens to a lot of kids, me included, when I stopped hanging out with friends because I wanted to go to the gym. Or I sacrifice relationships for when I go to the gym. And people can say, yeah, that's hardcore, and yeah, all the da-da-da-da-da. But I have enough honesty to say that I'm probably not going to make much of a career in lifting weights. Like, I like it, but the reason I can't went into academics is because I want to add it with something else, because I know I can't make money lifting weights and showing off my physique or anything like that. I know currently that's just not an option for me. I don't have the genetics for it. So,
You think you would sacrifice that time for other reasons than making money?
sacrifice that time for other reasons than making money.
Yeah.
Well, when I say making money, that's just one example, because because you're also, again, sacrificing relationships, sacrificing friend groups, and it can turn into this sort of self-destructive sort of aspect, because it is an addiction. It can be an addiction. When most people think of addiction, they think of like alcohol and drugs, and when you talk about something like alcohol, it's quite easy to articulate how you get addicted. Because even in the localized area when you're just drinking for a night out, that's kind of a good way of articulation. And this is what John uses as an example. So when you drink, the reason you drink is you're usually in a stressful environment. You have social anxiety or something like that. So you drink, and that gets rid of the stress.
The edge off, yeah.
Takes the edge off. But what it also does, and how it does that, is it reduces your cognitive agency. So you're not as aware of your surroundings. And if you ever become aware that you're not as aware of your surroundings, you can't deal with that, well, you've got to drink more because that's more stress. And you're kind of in this reciprocal sort of relationship where you're coming in, and then there's a stage where you just black out. You've got no cognitive agency and you've got no stress. And if you want to carry that on for your whole life, that's alcoholism, and that's a proper addiction.
And not to delve too deep into alcoholism, but that only amplifies your anxiety when you're not drinking too. So that's the paradox. That's the cyclical nature of it.
Yeah. It's reciprocal. It's a constant motion. So with lifting, you can get into that sort of cycle where it's like, okay, I'm only going to start hanging out with my lifting friends. I'm going to start, my girlfriend right now doesn't like the fact that I'm training and spending all this time in the gym. Okay, I'm going to cut her off. I can't go out and eat. I can only eat the meals I set because I got to hit my macros and all that stuff. Oh, I'm going to start taking drugs to improve my fitness, and this is going to cause a bunch of other issues and all that. So you're slowly getting into that sort of reciprocal negative cycle. And when people say, well, lifting's not a drug or anything like that, a big advertising part of lifting is the endorphins that you get from it. And
dopamine hit.
The dopamine hit from lifting weights.
Yeah.
So I just, if you're a young person, there will be a stage, if you're going to do this for a long time, there will be a stage, a year or two, where you do this, where you most likely sacrifice a lot of friends, and you lose a lot of friends, and you lose a lot of partners, you lose a lot of opportunities because of this pursuit of lifting. And just to be aware of that.
Yeah, I've used this analogy on a few other episodes too, but Chloe, she's a IFBB pro bikini athlete. And before one of her big international shows, she went and saw a sports psychologist to talk about the pressures of competing overseas, all that kind of stuff. And an analogy she gave her in terms of her identity was, as a professional athlete, if you look at your identity like a pie chart, about probably 90% of your identity is staked on being this professional athlete. And it's on a really fragile foundation, because if you get an injury, can't compete, can't train, now what do you have left? So I think that applies even if you're not a professional athlete, but if you're training 6 days a week, you're prepping all your meals, that is good. There is definitely a lot of positive benefits to that than doing the reverse or the opposite to that. But at the same time, it's about having that self-awareness of what are these other pieces to my pie that are also important for my well-being, for my identity, and that's your friends, family. Maybe you have a hobby where you make music, or you do something where your foundation of your identity and also how you distribute your time isn't purely staked on this one thing. And I think the only times when maybe it's okay for your pie to be predominantly taken up by one thing is maybe you're prepping for a show. Okay, I've got 12 weeks where I need to focus. I need to dial in. And you can learn a lot from that, but it's not every single day.
Exactly. It's if you start to expand and look at your life as like a whole linear sort of section of time, you're taking a small chunk of that.
Yeah.
and you can choose. You can, if you've got the awareness, you can choose to say, okay, I'm going to spend the next 5 years trying to get the best as I can at this, at bodybuilding or whatever sport. And then if it's not working after then, if I'm not seeing significant progress where I can see this working in the long term, then hopefully you have the willpower by then, which you should if you have that moment where you're like, okay, I can do this for 5 years and then see what happens. Because talking about like Dave Tate and this guy Jay and Blakely, another brilliant podcast you should all go listen to. Jay and Blakely was one of the first people to ever bench 600 pounds. And he talks about how when he got old and when he got injured, the identity crisis that comes with it. And I think the main danger with trapping your identity to something like lifting is because it is a material sort of thing. I think there's a far more benefit in pursuing something more idealistic. So like more rather than something like material, like I want to be known. My identity is I go to the gym. Like, okay, well, my identity is I am a wealth of knowledge on training, because something like an injury and that can't really take that away from you. Besides, if you have a brain injury and something like that, but
it's like a higher level.
That's
thing.
something you. That's a whole different.
Yeah.
That's a whole different.
It's almost like saying I am a dedicated person. That could be applied to lifting.
I aspire for discipline.
Yeah.
I aspire for greatness. I aspire for power. I aspire for love.
So we went pretty deep down a rabbit hole there when we were talking about your decision to go back to study. So at what point did you?
So when I was studying down in Otago, I did a 6 month spell at uni there where I studied psychology, because that summer beforehand, I was right up Jordan Peterson's alley. We were talking about this, how when you work, I was working on a farm. I was by myself a lot of the time, and I was just listening to stuff on my headphones. I was actually spraying gorse, I think. So I'm literally just out by myself with a knapsack on, walking around the house.
Not have to think at all, just spraying stuff.
Just spraying stuff. So I was doing that, and I was listening to a lot of Jordan Peterson's lectures. There's Maps of Meanings particularly, and I was like, okay, the psychology stuff is pretty interesting. At that stage, I was undeveloped in academics, in my academic mind. I was always, I wouldn't call myself gifted at school, but I never really had to try that hard. And it's funny because at school, all I wanted to do was lift. All I wanted to do was lift weights. I didn't want to play rugby. I didn't want to do well in academics. I kind of wanted to do well in academics in my last couple of years. Well, my second to last year. In NCA too, I kind of wanted to do well. But yeah, I got excellences all throughout, all that there without trying too much. And then I was listening to this, like, okay, I'm going to go study psychology. Do that. Go down there. I'm still in that same mindset. All I want to do is lift weights and party.
Yeah.
All I want to do is that.
At least you had partying in there now.
Yeah.
It's something else.
That was at high school as well.
That
was at high school as well. That was at high school, which, is pretty standard New Zealand sort of experience for a lot of people.
Sounds very similar to me.
Yeah. But you, see, this is one of those things, this is something I used to always talk about when we were down at uni in those first couple of years. The people who were drinking and partying before they got to uni always handled themselves so much better when they're down there, because they had that stage. You had those people who never touch a sip of alcohol. They go down, they turn 18, and they can go, they're unlimited access to booze. They would be the people who get in dangerous situations.
Yeah, absolutely.
So parents out there, let your kids drink alcohol. Right?
Yeah, but you have the ability to monitor it.
Yeah.
And then they know
limit it.
If I have 3 beers, I'm going to feel this way. If I have 10 beers, I'm going to feel like this, instead of going to uni and here's scrumpy hands. Take these scrumpies into your hands and finish them. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, when I was down there, that's all I kind of wanted to do. I like lifting weights. It's like, okay, I'm going to become a PT. Reason why I took a course down at the Otago Polytech down there. It was a 2-year course, I think. I got my diploma in it, so I think it's 2 years. I did it in a year and a half.
So you obviously finished or stopped at uni?
Yeah.
You stopped your psychology?
I stopped at uni. Because I was like, I know this is going to be easy. I know I can just, if I do this course, I can just lift weights and drink.
Yep. Doesn't get any better, right? Yeah.
So I did that. I got really fat down there.
Yeah.
It was brilliant. It was absolutely awesome. But that's pretty much what I did. After that, I got into a pretty serious relationship at the time, but it was with a American girl. So she obviously had to leave. Her visa ran out, and I wasn't in the position where I was happy to commit and go over to the States then. I do a year down there personal training at just a local gym. It wasn't at a box gym. It was just at some family-run business. Had to pick up a second job because I wasn't making enough money doing that.
So you're a contractor there?
Yeah, I was contracting, and then it was dumb. I shouldn't. Yeah,
It's a hard game, man.
Oh,
especially at a small gym like that.
Yeah, it was ridiculously hard. There is definitely something to be said when you're starting out to have a standard job going into the fitness industry where you have some set hours. Like I was doing maintenance work for the gym because I just needed some hours. So I wasn't there like fiddling with equipment. I was buying equipment for the gym and stuff like that.
Well, that's actually good advice because then you're at least in the gym and you can still network with members.
Still on the floor. But I was going through a pretty rough patch then because of just a lot of life happening at that time. And then I met another American girl, and this time I was like, right, fuck it, I'm not gonna make the same mistake. So I regretted not going over. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go with this one over there. Yeah. So I went over with her, and I was only there for probably about 2 months. Yeah. And then COVID hit. Shit. So in that whole previous year, I was like in that self-reflection stage. Because I was having to work so much. I was working like 70, 90-hour weeks when I was only getting paid for like 30 tops. Damn, bro. Trying to get, just having to be in the gym because when you're PTing at that sort of stage, you're working really weird hours.
Yeah. Like early mornings, late nights, 1 and 2 in the day.
Yeah.
All
and
over
you're just
the
at the gym the whole time.
Yeah.
The whole time.
Yeah.
So when I say working, I was at the gym. And then I was doing 2 extra days working at Mitre 10. And I was like, okay, well, I don't really like this job. I don't like this lifestyle I'm living. I just want to get out of here. This whole time I'm still like listening to like these sort of podcasts and self-improvement. I'm putting a lot of my money that I do make into different courses online. A lot of them are pretty like crackpot and stuff like that. But like, fitness courses, there's some interesting stuff that you can get sucked into.
Not to go on too much of a tangent, but what did your own training look like during that time?
I was competing for a powerlifting meet.
Oh yeah, so you're still training pretty hard.
Yeah. I was flatting with a bunch of powerlifters at the time. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do a meet. Yeah. This is when I was getting right into like Westside Barbell and all that there. I loved it. I brought a bunch of chains. I brought a bunch of bands. And all that there. I was doing all this sort of stuff. Meet was fun, but I couldn't manage my stress because this whole time I was undiagnosed with pan-osteoarthritis, and I was still dealing with the symptoms. And because just the way I am, I'm just like, well, this is just life. I just got to buckle up and deal with this. Okay, something with my diet. Let me change my diet and try to fix this. Where I actually needed drugs to get on top of that, and luckily, in this last 6 months, I've been diagnosed probably 2.5 years ago. In this last 6 months, I've got the right drug. So that's been great. But yeah, I was going through all the stress, and then I was like, right, I want to get out of here. So I was like, okay, you're giving me a place to stay in America. Let me just go to America. So I just saved up a bunch of money. I moved back to the farm. Yeah. I used to crutch, so dagging sheep and stuff, and I know I can make better money doing that. So I went into that for a summer, made a bunch of money, and then headed over with no real plan. So pretty much over there, I had 2 months where I was just traveling around here and there, and I was just studying. I was just listening to music, listening to podcasts, trying to read books.
This is right at the end of 2019, I guess.
Yeah, 2019, 2020. Yeah. Because I got back the week before we went into our first lockdown.
Yeah. Bro, that's lucky, man. You could have been stuck over there.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. If you're ever flying, I 100% recommend a travel agent. I know a lot of people don't do it, but like I trained a travel agent down in Dunedin. Yeah. So she sorted me out, and I wouldn't have got home as quick as I did without them. It was amazing what they actually did for me. Literally, me calling up the night before and then getting a flight the next morning. I didn't want to do that.
Real, man.
I didn't want to do that, and so over there I had a lot of self-reflection. I like to do like pros and cons lists and all that there, and I was thinking, okay, if I'm going to go and study, I'm not just going to get an undergrad. I got to do something more significant with that. I was like, okay, so by the time I finish like a master's degree or something, okay, I'm going to be roughly 25. I've pros
Still
and cons.
so young.
Yeah. Pros and cons. So 25, I'm going to have a bunch of debt, but I'm going to have a lot more tenure to spend because I always kind of wanted to work for myself. Even though I have so much bad stuff to say about working for yourself at the start, it's just one of those things I aspire to do.
Mm.
It's not like one of those things I'm made to do. It's one of those things I aspire to do. Like also like the one of the things I'm not really made to lift weights. I was when I got good at fitness, it was in running, long distance running. I was never good at sprinting. I didn't have those fast twitch muscles or anything. Something I aspire, not something I'm necessarily good at. So I wanted to do that. Did my pros and cons list, and like, okay, I'm going back into study. What am I going to study? Well, I like philosophy and I like politics, but they aren't really hard sciences. They don't have any skills really with them. All you need to work on your skills in is your reading and your articulation. That I can do in my free time. What I know I won't be disciplined to do in my free time is to learn calculus, relearn statistics, do all the programming, learning all those sort of tools. So like I'm going to go and do economics, and then I can just do my minor in. I think I started my minor in political science, and I moved it to philosophy because philosophy is just that much better, and I couldn't deal with all the poli-sci students.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was my decision to go back into economics, and I love it. I think everyone should learn basic economics. It's a great tool. It has such a bad rap in academia, but that's because I think it's gone down the wrong path. I think that a lot of the economics that is used today is...
So it's politicized?
Well, of course it's politicized.
Used as ammunition for someone.
It's not articulated in a way for people to correctly grasp what it's trying to say. And that's something that I want to aspire to do, is to bring back, because everyone who's in any sort of academic disciplines, they always like to shit on economics. I'm sorry, I didn't ask if that was swearing, and this is just
it's all
fine.
good. yeah. This isn't made for kids.
Yeah. And I think that's just because there's been a severe lack in interest in economics. I think if you go back to like the 1910s, the 1920s, 30s, this was when like economics was just coming onto the scene. It was this new exciting thing, and now that sort of spark has disappeared, and they just become okay. Now we're just pencil pushers. We just do statistics, and that's fine. But I think the statistics can be really bad if you don't have the theory behind it.
Yeah, in my psychology degree, I had a couple of spare papers, and one year I decided to pick up economics. And I personally loved it. Obviously, there's some hard formulas and stuff that you have to learn, but I think the concept of it and understanding not fully understanding it, but having a better understanding of how the economic environment works, I actually really enjoyed it. And I think because it's not super, super hard math where you're just caught in the equations, it's more applicable to real life situations, how a business works or how a local economy or a global economy works. I found it so eye-opening and I actually really enjoyed it.
Well, economics for me, especially microeconomics, is like the comparison between like psychoanalysis and psychology. So psychoanalysis is more, or to put in philosophy sort of terms, it's like the difference between like analytic philosophy and like logic compared to like metaphysics.
Yeah.
It's economics is an attempt to contain and make variables unknown to us discrete and able to be grasped. So it's always going to fail in that endeavor. And economics get a lot of flack because they fail in everything. It's like, well, they kind of got the game rigged against them.
Yeah. And when you're trying to extrapolate or predict into the future, you can't predict something like a lockdown. There's so many unforeseen things that you can't possibly predict or add into your equation because they're unforeseen. What I found interesting in that sort of segment of your journey, say the going to the States, just being like, fuck it, I'm going to go this time, going to go home, go on the farm, work, go over there. But then that's such a contrast to, okay, I want to go back to study. I'm going to carefully weigh up my decision here. pros, cons, make sure it's a well thought out decision. I don't know really where I'm going with this, but how do you navigate that sort of contrast and decision?
If I want to be, a couple of things I could say here. To be on the surface level, I could just say hormones is a magical thing when you meet a girl and you just want to run away.
Different motivations.
Yeah. But another thing you could start talking about like your subconscious compared to your conscious modeling of the world. So subconsciously, I knew that I was hating my life and I was looking for a way out. And this was just a moment for me to do that. When I got over there, I knew I didn't actually like this girl as much as I thought I did. It was more just...
I wanted to ask what happened to the girl because you said you were travelling around lots.
Yeah.
I'm like, was she there or?
Oh, no, yeah, she was, we don't really need to go much in this, but she was still a student over there and using that as a home base, and I was traveling a bit from that place. Yeah. But, yeah, it was more, I think it was just more like my subconscious stress coming into like a actual outburst where I just like, okay, I just want to get out here.
Needed to channel it into something.
Yeah. It was a good outlet for it. And I knew I wasn't going to be there for forever. Hence why it was so easy for me to come back. And also I didn't get a working visa over there. So that kind of limited.
Yeah, just the travelling visa then.
Yeah, I literally, when I was over there, the only money I made was I built a shed for the person I was staying in.
Nice.
So you go.
That's
There
handy.
you go.
Well, I noted down quite a few things when you were talking. I kind of want to pull it back maybe to your journey with personal training. So prior to you leaving there, how did you find that journey with personal training? Obviously, it sounded quite difficult from a financial aspect, but from a higher level retrospective perspective that you have now, how did you find that and what were some of the big learnings for you from that experience?
So one thing for people who want to be personal trainers, a good distinction to figure out with your clients whether they actually want training or they just want to work out. So that's one thing that I found really useful is when I found usually the older clients I had, they just wanted to get a sweat on and they just wanted to be in the gym and they wanted their endorphin rush.
They don't want to know what muscles and joints they're using. If this is a compound exercise, isolation exercise.
They don't necessarily want great progression. They just want the progression done from changing from not moving at all to moving somewhat.
And having that accountability of seeing you each week.
Yeah. And then with other clients who actually want to progress in a directed sort of aspect, they actually want proper training. And you need to learn how to manage how you treat each type of client. Because what you may think is that the person who wants training actually needs more work, they need less work. Because they already come in with the attitude of, I'm here to work, I got my goals, I know where I want to go. All you need to do for me is just point me in the right direction and make sure I stay on that path. With the other people, with those who just want to work out in the gym, you need a lot more work with them because they are the kind of people who don't really want to be there. They don't enjoy exercise that much. They enjoy it at the end, but they hate starting out. They a lot of them are there for socially, like I used to train a lot like peers and groups and stuff like that in a social aspect, and you got to let them be social in that.
Yep.
You gotta provide what they actually want from the session, and it takes a little bit of a keen eye to figure out what they actually want from it.
Mm-hmm. And through this, did you meet any people or maybe just self-discovery through that helped sort of guide your interest into what you ended up studying? Because I know for me, I met so many interesting clients, and it's probably different to working somewhere where you work like Mitre 10. You might be working with more people sort of around your age, really similar interests, but I found that personal training, you're interacting with so many different people from different walks of life. It kind of opens up your world in a sense because you start to get little snippets of these different areas of life that could potentially you could be interested in or you could pursue as well.
It wasn't for me when I was analyzing like clients, which sounds pretty rude in some way, but it's what you got to do. When I was analyzing clients, I would more analyze the psychology of what I thought they were doing. why they were there and stuff like that. Conversations we sort of had, I try to direct, because at the end of the day, they're still there to work out.
Yep.
There's always that time where you get those moments where they might give you a couple of words of wisdom, or you get some sort of insight into like how their life works. But I tried pretty hard to stay away from that, because at the end of the day, they're paying me. And I don't want this to become a relationship where it's like a sort of like pseudo mentorship or something like that. Because there's definitely people I trained who could be like that, who are very successful in different aspects. There's some really cool guys I met down there, and girls. But yeah, I tried to stay away from that. Which may have not been the best thing, but it was just something that I was dealing with at the time.
Yeah, well,
Practicing at the time.
And I could see how going into a job like that, you do perceive it like, these people are here paying for my service. I don't want to be getting their service while they're here paying me. That's an interesting take on it.
Which again, going back to those people who just like to work out, a lot of people like to hear the sound of their own voice, and a lot of people like to tell you how good they are. So there are those people. And that's all fine if that's what they're paying you to be there. But you, after a couple of sessions, they get bored of that. And they can, if they come in on a bad day, or they've had a bad day, and then you expect them to be in that sort of mood where they just want to talk to you about how good they are and stuff like that, they can get pretty angry and get pretty disappointed if you don't actually provide them the training that they want.
Yeah.
Because they subconsciously know that this is the relationship that we're building. Even if they're not conscious about it, you can pick up sort of tells that when they start to get frustrated with the service that you're providing. So don't get too comfortable in those sort of aspects.
It's an interesting observation. One area that we started talking about but didn't necessarily go into solutions mode for was the managing your identity and the how, well, I use the analogy of the pie, but I didn't really ask for your solution. So you were saying how it's not a good thing to have the majority of your life taken up by your lifting or your fitness pursuits, because that could be at the detriment to your relationships and other things. How do you now navigate that space to ensure that doesn't happen? Because like you've got a show coming up at the end of the year. Is that something, and you're obviously doing your study and stuff, so a lot of your time is taken up. How is that something that you try and navigate now, and what solutions do you have in place?
So one thing with the show, then, I've outsourced that effort. So I got a coach.
Yep.
So I got a coach who's going to do my nutrition. I'm still going to do all my training and stuff like that. Just because I like to do my own training, and I've been training for 10 years. So there's obviously going to be, the guy could probably help me out, but one, I don't want to spend the money on that. And two, I think I'm capable enough to do this. But outsourcing the nutrition, that is going to be something that takes a huge amount of mental effort off my back.
Yeah. It's definitely the most complicated part of prepping for a show.
Yeah, especially when it comes down to the last 4 weeks and stuff like that. When your mind is playing tricks on you.
You perceive yourself as being at a higher body fat. I need to make a change.
Yeah.
Oh shit! I just lost a bunch of muscle this week because I drove my food down too low.
Yeah. So that in terms of the identity, getting your identity caught up in a materialistic sort of endeavor like lifting, I think to make your identity more into something, to aspire to a concept or an ideal, that there seems a lot more safe. Because if you say, okay, I want to be great, that's my ideal I want to go for. Everyone's going to have their own individual concept of what that is, but that can be molded to any scenario, but you're still aiming upwards.
And it can be applied to different facets.
Yeah.
Because one thing that I was thinking about when you were discussing the idea of addiction and sacrifice, how would you draw the distinction between addiction and dedication? Because I see this reverse or counterculture to the fitness movement, which I can take parts from, but often I can't see what's the solution. Okay, you're telling me I don't need to worry about being in shape, like not necessarily you, but the counter movement. I don't need to worry about being in shape. I need to love the skin that I'm in, and I agree with all of that. But what happens, being dedicated and also pursuing something fitness related can bring so many benefits physically, mentally, and obviously, so how do you draw that line between addiction and dedication?
When people say that they want to feel comfortable in their skin and they prefer that, that's been addicted to something else. So the solution to addiction is its opposite, which is love. So moving towards loving the gym, loving your body, and loving all that sort of that, loving all those aspects of yourself. I was the best, well, an articulation that might be useful is the opposite of addiction, which when we talk about that reciprocal sort of closing of options, of availability, of skill, of time, of pleasure, the opposite of that is true with love. So if you're in love with the gym, if you're in love with lifting weights and the gym and fitness and all that, you will know when it starts improving the other aspects of your life and not taking it away.
Yeah.
It's reciprocally, the more I put into this, the more the other aspects of my life get better.
That reminds me of how Huberman articulates addiction, and that's a narrowing of experience.
Yeah,
So
you're expanding experience.
Yeah, so the opposite is expanding your experience.
Yeah, and it's reciprocal.
Yeah,
it's like I can see that we're coming to almost running out of time, because you can talk about this, especially with girls and stuff like that.
Still got a solid 30 minutes on the clock.
Oh, do we?
Reckon?
Okay,
Yeah, bro.
my clock's looking a little different.
It says 1:45.
Yeah,
I don't know why. Just look at the 45.
okay,
It's just been 45.
Okay,
yeah,
sweet.
Confuses me as well. No, we're good.
Good as gold. Because you can see this with relationships as well. When, again, something that I've done and something that a lot of young guys get into is they get addicted to a girl, or they get addicted to the idea of having a girlfriend and stuff like that. And that's that reciprocal closing off. Stop hanging out with friends, taking away from gym, taking away from things I love, and putting it all into one.
It's the narrowing of experience into
down.
You and her.
Whereas if you look at anyone with a healthy relationship, and you see this with a lot of people, those people that are living like two different lives, but they're still like madly in love, and they're like expressing like outwards. It's always going outwards.
That's the lack of codependency in that situation, I suppose.
Yeah.
Changing tack a little bit, I guess it's still on the similar vein, but I'm so intrigued by these two areas of your life where it's the lifting and then the academic side of things. And I think it's because it's something that I relate to a lot because I did my degree in psychology, been going to the gym since I was 13 or 14. There's a lot of similarities here. I also did pretty well at school. How do you, or what are some of the transferable skills either way? So obviously the training came first. So what were some of the things that you learnt from the physical stuff, the training, that you could then implement and apply into your academic pursuits? Because no doubt that takes a lot of your time, a lot of dedication, a lot of sacrifice as well.
I can talk about the actual practice of academics, and then I can also talk about the outlook of academics.
Yeah.
In terms of practicing, of course, lifting weights, one of the best things about it is its dedication. There's days that you go into the gym and you don't want to be there. There's days where you want to eat something that you know you shouldn't eat.
I'd say those are arguably more often than the reverse.
Yeah, it can be. You go through, again, if you want to break up time frame, there's little moments where you go through these rough patches.
Yeah.
And you can mitigate them with good training and good nutrition and
making sure you enjoy your training. If it's constantly shit, okay, how about you change it so you actually enjoy it?
Especially if you're not working towards a competition or something like that.
Oh. Okay. We good?
So that carryover, that discipline of wanting to do stuff when you know you shouldn't, when you know you don't want to, that there can be very beneficial in your academics. Fortunately for me, and the way I treat academics, the same way I kind of treat training. People talk about like daily undulating periodization or whatever, pretty much, or if it fits your macros. There's two different aspects towards training where you're kind of guiding yourself with your will. There can be a lot of downsides to this, and it doesn't work 100% of the time. But what it does do is it allows you to have flexibility within what you're studying or with what you're training and how you're pursuing your physical aspirations.
Yeah.
Same thing can be applied to academics to a certain extent. So one thing for me, I knew the same way I train. I like training how I like training. I like doing fun stuff. I don't like powerlifting. I did powerlifting. I don't like it.
It seems
I don't
ironic given that you competed in it, right?
Yeah, but I only did it once. That's
Yeah,
the thing.
yeah,
And
yeah.
now I'm doing bodybuilding.
One and done. Yeah.
One and done.
Yeah.
I don't like that sort of style of training. I like enjoying my training, and I like experimenting with stuff. Hence why when I was powerlifting, I was doing all like the West Side sort of
Yeah.
bullshit.
Yeah.
But how I treat academics for me and what I've found successful and what works for me is I read a lot, and I cast a really wide net, and that helps me when it comes to having more nuanced opinions in academics. I wouldn't recommend it as for most people, because when you're talking about academics, I've got a lot of bad things to say about academics as an institution, and this sort of approach is not designed for it. But again, if I'm moving my identities towards some sort of aspiration, some ideal aspiration rather than a material one, as in I'm looking for being knowledgeable, and that's what I want. I want knowledge. That's completely different to I want a piece of paper with a degree with good grades and stuff like that.
In order to get a job or something.
Yeah. I want to be able to articulate myself, and I want to be dangerous in any sort of environment that I'm in.
Yeah.
Mentally and physically. That's completely different to I want to have a doctorate and I want to bench 405 pounds. I want to bench 4 plates, something like that.
Yeah.
They're completely different.
Yeah, and I love that view of pursuing something academically, because there's, I understandably, when we view going to university, I think the first thought is always, okay, what is the job you're going to get out of that? Which is understandable, but that's only one aspect of an academic pursuit. So for one thing that I learned retrospectively from going to university is it's as simple as expanding your network. If you're going to stay at home
100%.
and always like be in the same environment, you're not going to expand your network like socially. You're not going to expand your sort of thoughts or your views of the world as much as you would by leaving home, going to pursue something academic. You might not use the degree at all, which, it's not the end of the world, but there's a lot of other learnings that can be extrapolated from it that aren't just about getting a job.
I hate how university has turned into this sort of mock trade school. Like if you want to trade, go to a trade school. If you want a good job that's high paying, get a good trade, get really good at it. You're going to earn a lot more than someone doing policy analysis for the government. The university, if you're going there to become a doctor, lawyer, they're all considered trades for me.
Yeah.
So that's perfectly fine and all that. But the only reason you should be going to university, or that I think you should be going to university, if you're not doing any of those trades, is, for one, networking. But you can network in any sort of aspirations. I don't think that's the best reason. So it's just a pursuit of love and knowledge. I tell most people, especially like other people in my family and younger people I know, that university, right now how it's structured, the incentives are all set up for you to make some bad decisions. So they're going in 1 year without fees. It's going to draw a lot of people there who are going to waste a year of their life. They may not be paying for it in cash, but they're going to pay for it in other aspects. They're going to shut off other opportunities that they could have progressed in. Because I've got a lot of good mates who went straight into trades, and they're making really good money.
Yeah, making really bank now. Like 4 or 5 years later, they're
making
killing it.
140K a year.
Yeah,
and I'm just like, okay, I'm not gonna. most people who come out of uni, they're on to like 60K, after that 67K.
Yeah.
Which is So if you're going there to make money, go get a trade. If you don't know what you're doing, go do something else. Go work. So at least you're not wasting time and you're learning something that's actually going to be useful, instead of just treating it as a year of what I did, year of drinking and lifting weights. But going back to like how I think lifting directed my learning, I think lifting is a very useful tool when it comes to education, because the beautiful thing about lifting, and Dave Tate says this about how when he got his education, and I think he did a nutrition degree, or it might have been something to do with exercise science. One of the two.
Yeah.
But what it did for him is it gives you a good bullshit radar, because one thing you know is that whenever you get under 100 kilos, it's going to feel like 100 kilos, and it's going to weigh 100 kilos. And when you build a good relationship with reality through this realization that there is things that my will cannot change, no matter how much I will it, I'm not going to be able to bench 180 kilos today.
Yeah.
Maybe something to inspiration on the future, but it's not going to happen today. No matter how much I will it right now, I'm not going to lose weight eating KFC and McDonald's every day. Like a ridiculous amount. You can do that, but you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. So it gives you a good bullshit radar for a lot of theories where they rely on this will. There's this really dangerous sort of ideology going around in a lot of institutions, which is this like will to power. If we have enough people believe something to be true, it can be true.
It's that herd mentality.
Yeah, that herd mentality. Protagoras actually talked about this: man is the measure of all things. It goes back all the way back to the ancient Greeks. It's been one of the three main like philosophical outlooks. It's creative anti-realism, which I think a lot of people get trapped in. Whereas like if we all will this policy to make something better, it will make it better. Whereas something like lifting can ground you in that. If you talk about, like, again, going back to the fat acceptance sort of movement and all that, there's no amount of will of you saying your body is beautiful is going to make diabetes go away.
Yeah.
It's going to help your cardiology. It's going to help your health indicators and all that, make you have good blood work.
Yeah. Well, that's such a interesting topic that you're going down there. I think one thing that might potentially couple with that as well is understand that you can't just with will make change be a thing or be implemented. It's almost like you're understanding your own ceiling as well from an individual perspective by pursuing something academic and by pursuing physical things like lifting as well. You understand that your capabilities are limited, and you understand that there's also things that you can improve on. I think sometimes if you don't try and expand the things that you physically do or academically do, you can become stuck in your own kind of echo chamber where you're just consistently reinforcing your own ideas, and it's hard to take that step back and realize, okay, well, I can be a fool in this situation, and if I am willing to be a fool and be humble enough, that's where I open myself up to being better, to learning.
Being addicted to your own ego, you're addicted to your own identity, can become very dangerous. Yeah, it's something that lifting weights, nutrition is something that it can be utilized when it comes to academics, because I think that bullshit radar, it just gives you a nose for saying this doesn't smell right. This doesn't smell right. I don't care what you're telling me. It gives you that skepticism, because even when you treat, like, if you look at the fitness industry as a whole, it's filled with so much bullshit. It's filled with so many fads that come and go.
Absolutely.
Being a part of that, even for 10 years, like, you just have this skepticism about when it comes out to, like, studies. Like, studies is a really good one when it comes to supplementation studies, because you can make studies prove anything.
Yeah, it's confirmation bias. You're studying for what you want the result to be.
Well, it's like, okay, so if you have I remember this product that came out, it was called Biofuel. It was pretty much just colostrum, and it was called Biofuel. And the guy, Tiger Fitness, Mark Bell, he was selling it, and he was like, this is going to be the next creatine. This is the next big thing, yada, yada, yada. And how he did the studies was he funded all the studies, and he pretty much got them to say that, you're going to get stronger, you're going to get bigger if you start taking this supplement. It's ridiculously expensive.
And this is where I find it, obviously you can do it as an individual when someone's asking you questions, but in order for people to understand how to navigate all the information that's out there in terms of fitness, because I've been doing some free sessions at work recently, and that's either consults, just catch up, or a practical training session. And a common theme that's coming from those, and I guess my clients at the gym, is it's really easy to get caught up in this super high level, super specific, convoluted sort of stuff, and skip over the information where it's just about forming a foundation. Let's see if we can form some kind of consistency with your nutrition right now. And for you, that could be getting takeaways 4 times a week because you currently get them 6 or 7 times a week. So yeah, I don't really know, other than me and how, I can recommend these people or this person or my own advice, how to educate people on navigating all the information that's out there. Because if you're type in how to lose weight, how to gain muscle, I don't know, there's going to be so much stuff out there. And yeah, it's understanding that bullshit radar like you talk about. But if you've got no background, or you're coming from a place of ignorance, I just want to get into this fitness stuff, what do I do? It's hard to know how to navigate that space and sort of weed through all the stuff that doesn't really make sense.
One thing that I've struggled with and what I'm aspiring to do is to somehow, the word I want to say right now is coerce, like all the bad information into a way of structuring it towards a better relationship. When people come up to me and ask about, like, how do I navigate all this stuff? If you can draw, because I think when it comes to a lot of people, like the friends that I help, the biggest thing for me is building them a positive relationship when it comes to food and training. Yep. One thing I'm always adamant on is when you first start getting into training, always leave the gym wanting to come back, feeling like you haven't done enough, because that's going to keep you back for a longer period of time than if you go there and blitz yourself and just don't want to come back because your DOMs are too ridiculous and, like, I don't want to associate.
Which is such a common story from beginners.
And it's such a bad practice from PTs because it's that same mentality, because most people who come in are those people who want to work out. Yeah. They just want to get a sweat, and that's what they think training is. And when it comes to food, the obvious example is getting on ridiculous diets and stuff like that. Yeah. I like to just build, whenever as I say, helping people out, build a good relationship with food. So one thing, if they are numbers driven, numbers minded, I like to get people starting out just to track the food that they're eating. Yeah. Just don't worry about what it is. Just see what you're doing. Just see what you're doing.
That's verbatim what I told someone yesterday. It's great advice. Yeah.
It's just, there's so many apps these days that it's not really hard to do anymore. You don't have to carry around a notebook. No. Like I did when I originally started tracking food and stuff like that. It was so silly. Yeah. But yeah, and then I can just build a relationship. Oh, I roughly know how much is in the sushi I'm eating. I roughly know what's the breakdown of all this sort of stuff. I know how to read a nutrition label. Yeah. And it also can bring forward like a lot of realization about maybe foods that don't agree with me that well, because you're making a mental note. You're making a physical note, not just a mental note of what you're eating. So for people starting out, I think trying to direct them towards more of a relation with fitness, and then all the nuance can come later.
Yeah. It's about focusing on that foundation. I love that advice where leave some in the tank in order to make you want to come back, because it's going to reinforce that positive cycle. And it's advice that I like to give to people where if you're currently going to the gym maybe 3 or 4 times a week, sweet. How about you set your goal at going twice a week? So then when you go 3 times, you feel really good. Yeah. Whereas, so it's a positive cycle. Whereas if you say, I have to go 4 times, it's not realistic, and you go 3 times, then it's such a high level thing. Yeah. And then you can easily apply that to your identity. Man, I can't stick to things that I want to do. I suck at achieving my own goals. I can't, push through when I set myself a target. Whereas if you do the reverse, oh, wow, I achieved that. I wonder what else, I can achieve if I set my mind to something. I have the ability to stick to things that I set for myself. So it's about what is the most achievable thing for you to do, but it's still potentially a slither of progression. So it's like that, if we were to pull it back to takeaways, okay, let's build up a nutrition picture. Right now, what are you eating? Okay, cool. You're getting takeaways every single day for lunch. Yeah, maybe perfection is you don't get takeaways every day for lunch, but it's not realistic. How about on Mondays, you bring your own lunch? And then, cool, I can easily achieve that, stick to that for 4 weeks, and then let's see if we can do Wednesdays as well.
Mm.
What I've noticed from my experience, personal training, is that, and it's understandable, I'm probably the same. Okay, I want to make this change. Here's perfection. I have to aim for that tomorrow. But you're going to stick to that for 1 week, and then you're almost inevitably going to fall off. Maybe there's 5% of people who wouldn't, but you're almost inevitably going to fall off versus what's the 1% I can improve this week? Okay, cool. Sweet, I did that. Next week, what's the little 1% thing I can do? Sweet, wow, I did that. And then imagine a year, 2 years down the track, implementing a framework like that.
Which there is definitely a fine line in terms of motivation and that sort of thing, because you also want that 1% to be some results.
Yeah.
But the beautiful thing about training is that those small changes can get quite good results.
Yeah.
Like when I was talking about the people who come to work out 2 or 3 times a week,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to get results from that because it's far better than living a sedentary lifestyle.
Yep.
One thing I did want to go back to was talking about how training and academics, I feel like I didn't do justice when I was saying a little bit laissez-faire about reading wide and training with the aspiration of fun and enjoyment. There's also that time where that doesn't work. It's a relationship though. You got to, just as like when you're coming into a show or you're prepping for a meet, you got to do the actual work. And that's the same with academics. When it comes time to knuckle down and study, you got to actually study.
Yep.
You got to actually put in that sort of time. So there's a time and place, but for me, when it comes to training and academics, you're not going to pursue something if you're constantly in that mode. So you've got to find ways around, set up an incentive structure for yourself where you can actually find pleasure in achieving the goals that you set yourself.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's also, I wouldn't know how to necessarily draw the line. It would be so subjective, but stress often comes as a result of not doing the stuff you should have done. So it could accumulate over time if you think, okay, I need to take some time out for my study, which often could be a really good tool. But then once you haven't done stuff, you've skipped 3, 4, 5 days, all of a sudden you're lumped with all this stress. So coming up with a reasonable framework where you still get the stuff done, but you allow for that time to do other stuff. But it would be come in phases, exam time. There's always hectic. You got a bunch of assignments due. That's always hectic. It needs some more time, but it's almost like periodizing it or having it in phases. But if you consistently think you need to take time out, then you're going to be lumped with all this stress because there's all this stuff you didn't do when you should have done it.
Yeah, like getting that day-to-day sort of ratio quite right. Like I know personally for myself, any more than like 4 hours of hardcore like academic work, my brain just fizzles out. Like I can still like sit and read a book in the afternoon if it's not challenging, but if I'm having to use my brain for 4 hours, that's all I really have in the tank.
Mm-hmm.
It's when I try to push past that, nothing useful comes out of it.
It's like you're switching on the lights, but the switch is already on.
Yeah.
It's not making any change.
It's not making any change whatsoever. So working around that and knowing that you only have a limited capacity in certain aspects, you can set yourself up for success in some sort of way.
Yeah.
So me being like kind of a morning person, I like to get up and I like to do my work early in the morning.
I was going to say, I love how you front load your day and having that time to yourself before you get into stuff, I think is so crucial. Waking up, you start work at 8:30, wake up at 8. Oh shit, I need to get out of bed, quickly get dressed, and then you get to here, you've had no time to mentally process for your day. Even if it's not an active process of, okay, what have I got on? You're coming in a more stressed state and you're not, of a clear mind when you're coming to do the work, whether that's work or study or even training.
Yeah, well, it depends what you're doing. Like, if you just have grunt work to do, you can get up and just do it.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to digest, like, what you're actually doing, if you're trying to digest academics or digest what you're reading or something like that, I think you need a little bit more preparation for it. Just as, like, in the gym, if you need to just go and do some cardio, you can kind of get up and do it.
Easy.
If you're doing like a max lift squat, you're gonna need a little bit of prep before that.
Yeah.
You're gonna need a little bit of setting your mind to the right place.
Yeah.
For most people, that is at least.
Yeah. And in terms of what's coming up for you, other than your bodybuilding show, what other things have you got on the radar?
Well, I want to get more into this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I want to start producing content.
Yeah.
I've always been one of those guys who have, for the past 5 years, made plenty of videos. I've done a few podcasts, and I've never wanted to produce anything.
What do you reckon the reason is there? Imposter syndrome, or?
Yeah, a little bit of imposter syndrome, but also I just don't. Again, spacing that time out. There's this saying in academics, pretty much, is you have to earn tenure in order to spend it.
Yeah.
And even then, you can't really spend it to a certain extent. But you need to have, in order for someone to listen to you, in my opinion at least, you need to have something to spend.
Yeah.
And if you jump in too early and you don't have the savings for it, you're going to burn out pretty quick. Because when it comes to something like content, especially in today's sort of model, like if you want to get on YouTube or something, making daily, every other day videos, the time you have to put towards that means you don't have the time to build up a repertoire to actually talk about.
Yeah.
A guy who's gone completely off the rails a little bit, but he used to be quite foundational for me. You know who Elliot Holmes is?
No.
He was OG fitness guy. OG fitness guy. And he talks about, right before he went off the rails, he talks about how he spent the first 30 years of his life just learning, just absorbing as much as he could, and taking in as much as he could. And now for the next 30 years, he just wants to dance in the knowledge that he has.
Mm-hmm.
And I quite like that analogy. Dancing between subjects and dancing around topics and spreading your knowledge in that, because he was at that stage where he knew pretty much everything he needed to know about strength and conditioning. He's a very well-read guy as well in philosophy and all that. So that's something that has always been conscious in my mind.
Yeah.
But of course, there's also imposter syndrome. I'd never say I'm a perfectionist. I'd never say that. I do quite like to just put out a lot, like especially in academics, I'm quite in that sort of mindset. I always like to finish my work early. Like I like to do stuff, finish it, like pretty much just hand it in a week early.
Yeah.
Because then I never have to worry about
Take
that
the
sort of
pressure
stress.
off. Yeah, it's an interesting one with the content as well, because those are all things that I was contemplating real hard even before starting something like this. And in terms of the tenure and having things to talk about, a piece of advice that I've learned in relation to that is it depends at what angle you're coming from when it comes to your content. If you're coming at it from the angle of this is what I know and I know it for a fact, that's very different to coming at it from the angle of, in my experience, I've learnt X, Y, and Z. So versus you telling people versus this is what I've learnt. Hey, maybe if you want to implement that in your life too, that's cool, but it's not necessarily coming from a place of I absolutely know this.
Authority.
Yeah, and you might be able to do that when you have studied for 20, 30 years in whatever your field is, absolutely. But to be able to have it be absorbed more and not just have people say, well, what do you know? That's something that I've thought about. And in terms of another aspect to that too is who's going to be listening to your content. Something like this, Huberman probably isn't going to listen to it, but someone who's just starting out at the gym might listen to it. So it's the audience. If someone has never gone into the fitness space at all, them hearing some really basic advice around nutrition, training, set your sights lower, aim for the lowest possible thing you can achieve. That's all really good stuff. But for someone who's the best CrossFit athlete in the world, they don't need to hear that. So it's also about what's the target audience too. And often, I've done this too. Well, this guy or this girl is already the top in this space. Who am I to enter this space when there's already this person? But this person is way above the people down here who are just getting into it. So I can be a person who enables these people to come up and, start their journey into this space. So
that's a very good economic analogy for how innovation comes about. It's that's good. I like that. Yeah, it would definitely be something I'm going to pursue this year.
Yeah. I think you do great at it, honestly. Like, you've got a lot of interesting ideas. You speak really well. You're not talking too fast.
Thanks, man.
You pause when you need to. You don't say like and and so it's certainly something that you could pursue. And there's clearly a lot of knowledge and a lot of tenure, like you say, already there. Yeah, you're not the dude who's 75 and has been practicing this strength training for 60 years.
Not Charles Glass.
Yeah. But there's still a wealth of knowledge there that you can help and enable people. And you say that you like to help friends and people that you're close to. Something like this, you might have 50 people listen to it, and then 10% or 15% of those people might be benefited, and that's like as if you're helping a friend, but then there's 10 or 20 other people. Obviously it could be millions of people, but there could be more people that you could benefit just by doing something like this.
Yeah. Big fan of small differences shape the world.
Yep.
There's another quote of this guy. I haven't been able to find his podcast episode again, but the guy I used to quite like following, this guy called Lewis Howes.
Oh yeah.
Pretty sure his podcast was The Art of Greatness or something like that. And he had this saying where it's like, the guy on it, Garrett someone, I've never been able to find it again. He had this saying, it's like, you change a man, you change your family. You change your family, you change your neighborhood. You change your neighborhood, you change your town. Change your town, you change a city. You change a city, you change a nation.
Yeah.
And you end up changing the whole world. So I think those small things is really motivating. And like stuff like this is quite useful in that sort of aspect. So yeah, it is definitely something that I would pursue this year. One thing I was going to ask, just because you're in this sort of space, who are the kind of people you started like following at the start? Like, you've been lifting for 10 years, like me, like I was just wondering like how, like in terms of content creation and stuff like that, who are the kind of people who you started following, and who is the kind of people that, okay, I can pursue this. This is a model that looks awesome.
Yeah.
That vibes really well with me.
I think in terms of the OGs, in terms of just me training, not necessarily content production, YouTube and stuff wasn't really that big, but I came across guys like Mike Rashid.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know him.
Yeah.
Matt Ogus.
Mike Rashid's such a badass.
Yeah. And just seeing him train, I was like, whoa, that's cool, man. I want to do that, train to failure and everything. Guys like Matt Ogus, I don't know, like Robbie Frame, I don't know, probably some Gymshark athletes or something. That was when sort of Gymshark was popping off. And then I was also watching the Generation Iron stuff, and like you're looking at Kai Green and Phil Heath and
that OG Generation
Iron. So it was like that 2010, 2012 sort of era. And then now I still definitely follow people like that, but I probably try and open up my perspective a little bit and follow guys like Squat University and Move You Official and stuff, where it's more about not just training hard, it's how do you optimize your body in order to be able to train hard. So at the start of the journey, it was more just bodybuilding, follow dudes who train real hard, whereas it's probably progressed over time to still following those people, but more about how do I get my body to move optimally, and also following different podcasts throughout that time as well, and it was different audio books. So the content's definitely evolved from just meathead, how to train hard and do drop sets and stuff like that, to more academic stuff like psychology stuff, and also how to better move the body and optimize it for training.
Do you think, I'm kind of asking you questions now about this, do you think there is an overemphasis for people starting out in that sort of aspect? Like, you see people coming into the gym, young kids who would always get caught up, like one of the single arm cable row on a bench, like stuff like that. Yeah, like saying optimal,
like getting super specific with their training. Yeah, and I don't even know how I would begin to follow people on social media now if I entered this space as a teenager. I feel like when I entered it as a teenager, there was hardly any fitness influencers, wasn't really a thing. There was like a few or a handful. Simeon Panda, he's another one actually I've been following since way back then. So now, I think that relates back to how to weed out, all the bullshit and the stuff that actually matters. I actually wouldn't know how or who to follow, because there's just an abundance of fitness influencers. And one downside of the fitness influencer stuff is the people who don't just stick to their foundations and what they know. And it's understandable because that might not be good for your algorithms and stuff, but always jumping on the new best exercise, or always jumping on the latest diet trends or the latest supplement trends. For me, that's, I guess, like a red flag. It's good to entertain new research, definitely, but I think if you don't have an obvious core set of foundations, someone who's in that space, maybe like the hypertrophy coach, I think he's a great example. He just sticks to the like bread and butter stuff.
Yeah.
Will entertain you exercises, definitely. Now, you don't want to be closed-minded, but if people you are following are always jumping on the latest, next best thing, I think that can be a bit of a sign that, I don't know if it's a lack of knowledge, but it's more like the content they're putting out is more for the views and the clicks and the interactions as opposed to just genuinely educating people.
One of my favorite podcasts just for coaches out there who people who aspire to be coaches as wealth of knowledge is Dave Tate's Table Talk podcast, because what he not only has on there, he's an old school powerlifter, but he also has a lot of high level coaches, like football coaches. And one of my like lifting influences, a guy called Jim Wedler, 531. You heard of the program?
Oh, yeah.
So 531 was his program, and he's a football coach.
Yeah.
And one thing he always talks about, especially when you're trying to help someone out, is only teach what you know.
Yeah.
Like there's this massive issue I see in New Zealand when I was training in New Zealand and when I was playing rugby and stuff like that. You'd have coaches come in and try to teach us, and because New Zealand's such a small country, the strength and conditioning side here was so far behind what it was over in the States. And you'd have people come in and try to teach like really complex movements to rugby athletes, like clean and jerks and stuff like that. And I thought that was ridiculous. I was never that good at rugby. I played first and all that sort of stuff, but I was never like, when I finished high school, I stopped playing.
Yeah.
But I had all these mates who would do like the Hurricanes training camp and all that, and they'll come back with these ridiculous programs. I'm like, how the hell is some kid meant to learn to clean and jerk, a skill that takes like 2 years of dedicated Olympic lifting, meant to do that after having one session and then practice that in season, or not even full year round, they only do it in the off season. So stuff like that, keeping stuff simple.
Yeah. An analogy.
And using exercises you know really well. Like one thing I used to always get my clients to do and want to still get people to do is the back squat's a hard lift to learn.
Yeah.
It's not that fun, and it's really hard. It can be quite dangerous, and people freak out because there's a bar on the back and the ground's there and they could get squashed. So an exercise I like to get people to do instead is a goblet front squat. 100%. And what I used to do, if you can do the heaviest weight in the gym, so it's usually like 50 to 60 kilos, if you can goblet squat that for 25 reps, then you can jump on a barbell squat.
Yeah.
Have that sort of progression lined up for people, because it's an awesome exercise. Works your upper back, it works your core,
Emphasizes good posture. You can't
great
be
posture, all that there, bicep work in there, and it's especially for some, because a lot of people these days, a lot of kids, they don't have that sporting background when they come into the gym either, so they don't really know how to move their body.
Yeah.
And an exercise like this is a carry as well as a squat, so you're kind of hitting two birds with one stone.
Yeah.
So I think with a lot of young people getting sucked into all this sort of social media, and as you say, like nuance, sort of specific, sort of training, it's all cool and all that, but I really just like seeing people at the age of 14 in the gym being all nuanced and that, and having 5 people going around a single arm cable row, which I'm like, you're going to be in the gym for 3 hours. It's, yeah.
Yeah, no, I get that.
That's my little gripe with that.
No, I understand, and we only get a few minutes left, so the last thing I want to add on to that, the analogy that I like is don't speak from a fragile foundation. 100%. And you can feel it too, and I've definitely done it as a trainer where you know that what you're teaching isn't something that you really know. You can feel it. If I'm teaching someone a goblet squat, I'm completely comfortable in cueing them and getting them to do it better. But if I was to teach a snatch, I'd have no idea. I could probably give it a shot, but you can feel it inside. And it's not just relation to training, but you can feel it when you're not coming from a place of a solid foundation or authenticity. So that's really good advice for trainers, but just good life advice in general. Anyway, to wrap it up, if people want to find you, because you're going to start producing more content too, if people do want to find you, look you up, what would be the easiest place for
On
them?
Instagram, it's got an absolutely mug photo of me right now.
You look massive in that shot though. I'm like, shit, he looks huge. Yeah.
It's such a funny photo, but yeah, it's quite good. So just Fred Falloon on Instagram. You'll be able to find me. Just look for a meathead in a white shirt.
That's you.
It's me.
Easy, man. Thanks heaps for coming on. I'm personally
appreciate
looking
it.
forward to your content, and who knows, we might do another episode again sometime soon.
Thanks for having me, man. It's a pleasure.